from my point of view, his background actually comes from other areas which I think are incredibly important for us today, such as the work of InfoDev. So he was Global Practice Manager for InfoDev and Global Practice Manager for the Innovation and Entrepreneurship for the Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice. His core areas of expertise are in innovation, entrepreneurship, competitiveness, and enabling infrastructure, and he has considerable, almost as many countries as most of us would be embarrassed to say we've visited. So he's worked in 40 countries. And he has an engineering background, so he can't be that bad either. And then Pancho Marapung is the Managing Director for SARO, which is the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory. And that was something the Minister referred to earlier in terms of the SKA and Meerkat, for example. So SARO is a facility of the National Research Foundation, responsible for managing all radio astronomy initiatives and facilities in South Africa, including Meerkat, Goddessay, and VLBI activities at the Hart Rail site. She previously served as a member of the board of Mintech and a trustee on the NRF Pension Fund. She also previously served as chairperson for the South African Council on Space Affairs and chairperson of the Science and Technical Subcommittee of the United Nations Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And she again has an interdisciplinary background. Leslie is current CEO of Wits University Simolonghong Digital Innovation Precinct, and she founded the Impact Hub in Johannesburg in 2010 to advance social innovation in Africa. She's a practitioner of inclusive innovation and facilitates participatory leadership dialogues and processes for collaborative action across multi-stakeholder innovation systems. And she also has worked across a number of different industries, which I think are important in this context, including academia, mining, banking, animation, and energy. And last but definitely not least, despite the weather that he is afraid that his wife may have brought back to South Africa from London, Marius Engelbrecht is a senior strategy consultant for Huawei Southern African region. He's worked with Huawei for the last 15 years and currently fulfills the role of senior strategic consultant within the South African region. And before working with Huawei, Marius worked for Telecom Africa for 19 years in network engineering and deployment. So a bit like when you don't want to see what happens in the kitchen, you definitely don't want to see what happens in the background to make technology work. And then finally, my name is Professor Paul Cunningham. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of the IST-Africa Institute. I advise governments on policy and strategy related to the use of technological innovation, particularly in low-resource environments. I'm affiliated with universities in Namibia and Wales, and I'm a past director of IEEE. So if I just share with you a little about IST Africa. So IST Africa was founded in 2002 as a strategic partnership with ministries responsible for innovation, science and technology in 18 African member states. We are focused on fostering cross-border, multi-stakeholder and international cooperation, with particular reference to technological innovation addressing low-resource environments. And as the Minister correctly pointed out this morning, I actually believe that low-resource environments have much more to teach the rest of the world than high-resource environments. Why? You know, I come from Ireland. 50 years ago, Ireland was one of the poorest countries in the world. Okay? And here we are today, and we're not too embarrassed with what we do for a living. So I think it shows that if you can identify where there are opportunities to adapt and innovate in a way that's appropriate, in a way that takes advantage of sociocultural norms and looks at the mindset and the insight that is available to people. And I mean, some of the examples that are going to be shared today will highlight that, of people who worked in a local village, traditionally didn't have access to most technology, but they fundamentally understood the environment in which they were working, and then could use that insight to then leverage technological innovation and then deploy it on scale. So funded in 2002 and co-funded by the European Commission from 2006 to 2018, IST Africa is a strategic partnership with ministries and national councils responsible for innovation, science and technology, adoption, policy and research. Supported by the African Union Commission and the European Commission, the not-for-profit IST Africa Institute collaborates with 18 African member states, and participation is open to all ACP or Africa, Caribbean, Pacific Group countries. So if there are countries that are represented here today that are not currently part of the IST Africa Institute, please take the opportunity to engage with us over the next couple of days. In terms of impact, over the last period of time, because IST Africa has been running for 20 years, we've secured inclusion of African-focused research and innovation calls in FP6, FP7, and Horizon 2020. And as the Minister highlighted, that's incredibly important, because you need to understand what the needs are to define what the research focus should be. Secondly, we've helped African universities secure over €200 million of research funding over the last 12 years and build strategic partnerships on a cross-border basis across Africa and equally across the world, which hopefully will be to the mutual benefit of all involved. What I'd like to do now is to delve down into a number of topics which we've agreed we'll address today. And they're all focused around the role of ICT research and innovation to strengthen digital innovation ecosystems in an African context. So the first kind of opening salvo, so to speak, so Jeanette is going to start us on this, is to outline some of the ways in which ICT research and innovation can empower and strengthen sustainable digital innovation ecosystems at both a national and a continental level. Jeanette?
Good day, everyone. Thank you so much, Paul. Yes, so in terms of building digital innovation ecosystems, whether it's nationally or in the continent, I think the key thing is around, firstly, looking at how we can harness the innovations that come from the African continent and sort of look at interventions on how we can support them. We have a lot of talent, a lot of innovations coming from the continent, but I think the key challenge is the commercialization thereof and make sure that we grow the SMMEs that are coming up with those innovations. So one of the ways that we can do that is firstly through partnerships, firstly at the national level, look at those that are supporting SMMEs in the tech space, and collaborate and come up with sort of a framework to say, when it comes to access to funding, these are the stakeholders that are responsible for that, and they can support the SMMEs. When it's on issues of access to market, I think government can play a very key role in opening up those markets by becoming the first buyer of these innovations, and put in place appropriate policies and regulatory frameworks to harness that. So for me, those are the two, I think, key issues that we can do. And once we've sort of developed proper frameworks on how to do that, then we can look at the rest of the continent on how to partner with the rest of the other African countries. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeanette. And you've set up some of the talking points that we're going to talk about in more detail later. Poncho, would you like to make an intervention?
Oh, hi. Thank you. I mean, while I can't claim that what we're doing at Serao, already sets up a full ecosystem, but I think, investing in complex science projects like building a radio telescope that's never been built before, forces us to develop solutions that will create, in the end, a really sustainable ecosystem. When you build a telescope that produces 2 terabytes per second data, and you need a 20 gigabyte per second archive, there is no way that you're going to find the solution in the market and still make it affordable. So from our point of view, we found the most clever people we could find. They worked not only among themselves, but with partners across the world, and built the compute and storage infrastructure that we needed to manage this data. And in that way, contributing not only to building a strong ICT ecosystem in South Africa, but also, becoming global leaders in some of these areas. An example of that is that Sarao was actually invited by the CEF Foundation as the first 30 global technology leaders in establishing and managing this massive growth in data and using, open source solutions to deal with it. So I think that in the African continent, investment in science, and it doesn't actually have to be directly, we are investing in building ICT infrastructure. But the fact that you are challenging astronomers to find answers to big science questions, that forces everything else then to be developed to enable that science to happen.
Thanks, Poncho. We have a saying in Ireland, I hope you share it here, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think the focus that you have on coming up with a low-cost solution that isn't currently available in the marketplace, and then you're going to talk about spin-off opportunities and things like that later. But I think that's incredibly important. Again, from a low-resource environment, if you're looking to scale something, you have to think low cost. You have to think efficiency. You have to think not reinvent the wheel. And that's why collaboration is so important. Ganesh.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, and thanks for having me on this panel. I'll just pick up on what both Jeanette and Poncho have highlighted in terms of commercialization of technology and access. So I think let me just sort of make 3 points. So first is, I think, where research and innovation can come in the context of South Africa and, say, Southern Africa. The countries which I'm currently covering is in service delivery. If you look at service delivery in terms of basic infrastructure, health, education, provision of government services to people, G2P services, access to finance, digital financial services, there are huge opportunities for ramping up research and innovation to support the ecosystem. Because the ecosystem in South Africa and the other countries, from our assessments, is fairly fragmented. There are elements of excellence in the ecosystem, the resources and capacities which are world-class, but at the same time there are huge gaps in terms of the divide between the challenges that are, for example, in the townships and the rural areas and what you have in these sort of pockets of excellence. So how do we bridge that divide through more innovation and sort of disruptive technologies is key. I think on commercialization, and I think that's an important part of the innovation agenda, because let me talk about the South African program now, and stop me if I'm too long, Paul. Which is quite exciting. It's the Innovation Bridge Portal under the Department of Science and Innovation. Dr. Mboweni has been a champion of this. The IBP, you can actually Google it. It's a digital platform initiated by the Department of Science and Innovation. The idea is to connect the actors in the ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurs, business service providers, incubators, accelerators, investors, funders, and the researchers from public sector and private sector institutions. So if you have a platform like that, that facilitates collaboration, networking, and partnerships. And it's a fantastic South African initiative, but what is exciting is that it's becoming a regional platform. So firstly with the 4 other SACU countries, and then hopefully it can be expanded to SADC and so on. So that's a concrete example of how innovation platform can support the agenda.
Thank you very much. And Leslie, I'm sure I don't have to put reins on you in terms of what you have to say about supporting entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Paul. So I agree with what all the speakers had to say, which is fantastic. Maybe I'll just quickly define what we do at Smolochong, because we consider ourselves to be a digital innovation ecosystem. And so we get up in the morning essentially to make sure we're creating world-leading African digital entrepreneurs. And that's super important for us, because we need to make sure that we're not just consumers of the world's technology, but we are producing as well. And I think COVID especially validated the need for this when we were on lockdown and we needed local solutions. And now we need to scale that up and not rest on our laurels, so to speak, because the pandemic is over. For us, when we think of what an ecosystem means, for us it is that partnership and collaboration between academia, public-private sector, for us international development agencies, to really make sure that entrepreneurship is at the heart of what we're doing, but each stakeholder has a role in this value chain. And I think we need to grease the wheels to understand how do we collaborate well to make sure that we commercialize, like you said. And going back to the role of innovation, it's critical. It's the bread and butter. It's the seed of innovation as far as we're concerned. We've got fantastic entrepreneurs in South Africa and Africa, but quite often it's either subsistence entrepreneurs or a lot of ventures based on assumptions that lead to failure. The role of research for me really promotes data-driven innovation. That we really gone deep, understanding the need, understanding the problem in a clear way before developing solutions for it. Where we do need to create a bridge a bit more is that once the concept is deeply researched and defined, before finalizing the ultimate solution, we need to use, we speak about design thinking principles. We need to circle back to the end users and validate the solutions we've come up with before going to market. And for me, that's where research, innovation, entrepreneurship start connecting in the ecosystem. And then finally, it gives us great access to talent. I think we've got talent, but the talent needs to be refined and supported in a correct pathway.
Thanks, Leslie. Just before I ask Marius to share an industrial perspective on this, my concern is one that you've alluded to, and that is how do we collaborate well? And my primary concern in an African context is duplication of effort. What we need are stakeholders like you and like the people on this platform and the stakeholder groups that they represent, working together, talking to one another. My mother always told me, Paul, there's a reason why we're designed with 2 of these and 1 of these. So I really think if we do a little bit more listening to one another and less about, we're doing something new and exciting, what are you doing to build on the shoulders of the giants who came before us? What are you doing to reinforce? How can different departments support one another, and how can different stakeholders across the public, private, education, research, societal and funding sectors work together in the most impactful, effective way? Because it's not about credit, it's about impact. Marius.
Thank you for that, Paul. Absolutely, I was privileged enough a couple of weeks ago to present a 5G master class at the SET University, and it was just so encouraging again to see the spark in the youngsters and the students and the entrepreneurs that are out there, and they kept me quite busy with questions afterwards. But I had the privilege to share with them, because of our global footprint and our representation in more than 170 countries, and coming from China as early adopters of technology, of course, being able to identify and tell them what the future holds. How do we apply these technologies? But critical importance is the role that they have to play in the future that we all expect to have one day. One of the things that we've successfully implemented in South Africa is a program which we call the Huawei ICT Academy, where we've partnered with 69 plus colleges and universities, and we have managed to train more than 30,000 students over the last 3 years. We also have a facility called an open lab facility, where we invite stakeholders and students, entrepreneurs, again to come and partner, so that together we can develop those solutions for Africa, from Africa. So we put it at a very high premium, the responsibility that we have, and I always say this to my team, is to educate and equip. The technology is there, we've developed it, it's available, but how do we apply it? And we need to understand, I say a lot of the times, it's easy to talk about the use cases in London or in Paris. Come and apply that technology in an Africa context. We've got real challenges, and we're not ignorant of those challenges. And again, that is why it's always important that the relevant stakeholders engage, talk with one another, and find those solutions. And within all of that, government obviously has a critical role to play in ensuring that the foundation is set and the mechanisms are in place that allow the network operators to deploy these technologies to the benefit of everybody on the continent. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Marius. So now we get into the bits and bats that we have to worry about in terms of how do we operationalize such a vision that you've heard shared by the panel today. So I'm going to start with my friend Benene. What types of investments are required to facilitate ICT research and innovation to play this enabling role?
Thanks very much. I think when you were doing the introduction, I was counting the years, 2006, thereabout. That was the time that the Department of Science and Technology at the time was working on what we call the ICT roadmap. And that was the roadmap that was going to direct as to where, as a department, we were going to invest funding for research. Because research is one area that is very important if we are really to get going. And we've continued to fund that, and now over the years we have now started to launch another multi-million rand research program, which we call the Foundational Digital Capabilities Research Program, which is being implemented through the CSIR. And the issue really here is we think that everything needs to start there. When we talk about whether we're talking the AI, we're talking about blockchain and so forth, we need to be able, through research, firstly to develop capabilities. We need to have the people who are going to be coming who are able to do that. We need to have products that are going to come out, and I think I'm happy Marius mentioned something about really having to develop technologies that are going to work in every kind of an environment. And this will only work if we've got our own researcher doing research to develop relevant technologies and in a particular context. For example, when you talk about artificial intelligence, you need to have systems that don't have biases that they would have if they were developed in a particular environment and they're not developed here. So that's really one of the things that we're looking at. There are issues around ethics of technology, and we haven't really gone around that. What are we going to do to make sure that whatever technology is going to bring to us, because it doesn't in itself have that human element, that we still make sure that the solutions that are coming out of these technologies are actually ethical. So those kind of investments through the foundational digital capabilities research are really what we're looking at, including the issues of making sure that when we talk about the aspect of inclusiveness, that in the context in most countries in Africa is how do we make sure that we do not necessarily disadvantage those that are in rural areas or those that are staying in townships, and also more especially the fact that you find that in our communities the biggest burden in terms of challenges is really borne by women. How do we make sure that technologies that we develop are also invested in a manner that they are transformative? So that's really where we're putting a lot of money. And then, I mean, at some point I'll really reflect on some of the actual programs that we're doing that are leading into some of the developments. But this is really quite important. Let's invest more on research and development, because there you are actually preparing a solid foundation on top of which all these other applications can actually spring up.
Thanks, Benene. I think it's incredibly important that we emphasize this aspect of inclusiveness and digital skills capacity building. Because in the end of the day, if people don't know how to use technology, they're not going to use technology. It's all very well to leverage technology to deliver public services everywhere on the continent, but if it's not available in a low resource environment because the bandwidth requirements of downloading the site are too high, or the cost of the data is so high that you run out, and this is something that I've experienced personally. My colleague Miriam and I recently led a European Commission-funded research project called mHealth for Africa, where we worked with the Ministries of Health in Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, and South Africa, looking at how you could introduce the use of technological innovation in deep rural environments with clinics. And one of the key challenges that we found were it had to have a distributed framework where you used, connection when you've got connection, but it stores everything locally until you have that. And then secondly, it has to have low bandwidth requirements, because most clinics were running out of their data budget after a couple of days. And they have to last until 30 days to get their new budget. So, you know, it's all very well to have a theory, but if you don't use the practice, it's important. And just one other thing I'd mention before I introduce Jeanette on this point is that Miriam and I worked with the Department of Communications back in 2010 when they were developing the eSkills Plan of Action for South Africa. And the eSkills Summit was one of the issues that came up was this, you know, should it be a right that you have access to the national connectivity that's required to be able to take advantage of that? Jeanette, I hand it over to you.
Thank you. So our Department of Communications and Digital Technologies is mainly a custodian of the ICT sector, and our role is mainly around creating an enabling policy and regulatory environment to allow players to contribute to the growth of the sector. And we mainly focus on 3 industries, which is the telecommunications industry, broadcasting, and postal. And according to the current report, the State of ICT Sector Report of South Africa by the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, there's total revenue reported of these 3 sectors, which has increased from 4.61% from 243.6 billion in 2021, and in 2022 it was 254.8 billion. So we strive as a department to work with the private sector to invest in the sector, but we mainly focus on investments around the rollout of ICT infrastructure, which is connectivity across the country. We also look at programs around how do we digitally transform the public service, making sure that we roll out an e-government program. We also look at how we empower our citizens with digital skills and ensure that there's secured use of ICT infrastructure and systems. But the other role that we play is to also support our sister department, Department of Science and Innovation, on how to get this private sector companies to invest in the sector, mainly focusing on investing in R&D and innovation. And one other way of doing that is to support the program by the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, where they say when companies do business with a country, they need to invest back. So they have a program called Equity Equivalent. And when there are equity equivalent programs coming from industry that are ICT related, then we sit with our sister department to say we need then to channel these investments into ICT R&D. And I think we've had key programs from Microsoft, from IBM, where we actually enforce that with the IBM program. They need to invest in R&D, where they are now based at the Timologong prison with a great research lab there, and there are others as well. So that's one other way that we're looking at investments, and I think collaboration and partnership. And I think as government we also need to be bold to say, when these investments come, we need to direct them to the right places, because initially you'd find companies, launching a cyber lab there in the rural areas, etc., and that doesn't contribute to ICT research and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that just reinforces the importance of looking at enlightened self-interest. As you say, you've taken a strategic approach towards public-private partnerships in terms of encouraging industry to make sure that they deliver programs that address societal challenges. But from my point of view, and I'm sure Marius will have something to say about this at the end, I think enlightened self-interest means that from an industrial point of view, the more digitally literate everyone is, the more of a market opportunity there is for everyone, as well as making sure that we're addressing societal challenges. So it's a win-win in a real sense. Ponzo.
Okay, this one's on. I kind of support, I guess, the points made by Jeanette and Bonini. I think that You know, you can see that there is progress being made in developing capabilities in South Africa. The one thing that I would want to add is I think we also have to focus a lot on young people. I think the good thing about this area is that, you know, you don't have to be in the middle of Johannesburg to be able to get involved. If you have access to some infrastructure and the ability to access material online, I think you can actually enable people even in rural areas to do this. I'm not sure if you guys know, a telescope is, I often say, is in the middle of nowhere. It really is far, and it's intentional because we don't want a radio frequency interference. So it was intentional to put it there. And it's surrounded by some of the, I would say, really poor communities that you can find in South Africa. So we started a program right from the beginning, working with the schools. For instance, I mean, there's only one high school that teaches maths higher grade within 120 kilometers of where the telescope is. So besides helping the school, but we also launched this robotics program, and it is just amazing to see these children for the first time learn how to code and compete. And we actually had a group that went to Morocco earlier this month, to represent South Africa in a robotics competition. At that age, you know, once you capture them there, then, you know, for them to figure out what to do with that skill becomes a little easier. And I honestly do not know that we do enough of that. If we are going to transform, I mean, we do it because, you know, the telescope we're building is going to be here for 50 years. So we want them to be available to software developers because we struggle to hire them. You know, so I think that one of the, as much as there's a range of investments being made, I don't necessarily know that we are thinking about the whole system, especially around skills development. I think that's the only point I wanted to add.
No, I think that's very important, and I'm delighted, and I'd be interested in learning more about the program that you're doing with the local community, because I think that's something that many of us, you know, even over small-scale enterprises, and I know that that's something fundamental to the public sector, or to the public universities in South Africa, that part of your budget is based on local service to your local community, and that kind of outreach to bring a generation of students or potential students who maybe would have never thought about the possibility of going to tertiary education. So I think that's incredibly important. Ganesh.
Technology is challenged. No, so at the risk of sounding like I'm drumming up business for the World Bank for investments, look, I fully agree with Jeanette that, you know, every dollar of public investment should try and leverage, say, $5 of private investment. I think that should be a metric of success, because you need that private capital and private expertise to come into play in the ecosystem. But I want to talk about something a little bit. Of course, we need investments in basic education, in energy in South Africa. No, that's not a surprise to anyone here. Infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, to make sure that it's affordable and quality broadband access to everyone, not just the ones in the big cities. In terms of cost of broadband, South Africa is somewhat in the middle globally, somewhere in the 119, I can't remember the exact rating, but somewhat in the middle. So there's scope to do more to bring down the cost of broadband, Jeanette, so it's affordable. But I want to talk about quality of investment, which is something that's often overlooked. We need investments in building capacity in government, for governance structures, for implementation capacity, so that, you know, we can track how the investments are being made, what is the impact of these investments, do we have good data systems, monitoring and evaluation systems to track these investments. I think the quality of investments is important. It's something that governments often overlook in terms of investments. They rather build science parks and new labs and so on, but not on the quality of investment. The other is, thanks, Janet. I hope you could hear what I said. The other is the investment in data. So open innovation networks, open innovation systems need open data, and transparency of how data is made available, and how is it collected, curated, and made available for research. And that becomes, again, data privacy and data security issues become very important. So these are areas where I think there probably needs to be more discussion on future investments.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. I do think that this issue of quality of investment is an absolutely critical one, because we hear people talking about donating computers. How many times have we heard of a computer being donated to a lab in a township? And then you go to the township and they're all plugged in and they all look wonderful, but nobody's allowed to access them because they don't have the skills to use them. So I think quality of investment is absolutely fundamental to this. So kind of, since we're now getting into the nook and crannies of how do we operationalize this vision, what types of regulatory frameworks and policies are required to support technology-enabled research, innovation, and entrepreneurship to support societal challenges? So, Jeanette, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Paul. I think, this area is one area that I'm passionate about. Because in South Africa, the current public procurement policy doesn't actually support the harnessing of adoption of technologies and innovations, especially with SMMEs. To give you an example, we have our state IT agency, SITA, that is responsible for the procurement of the whole of IT products and services for government. And whenever they do a tender, you find that it's mainly big companies, if not multinationals, who get those tenders. And you know, the gap it's actually within our policy, especially our public finance management framework. It doesn't allow for you know, the growth of SMMEs in this perspective. So I think we need to work as a collaborative with DSI and DCDT and other departments, as well as our state-owned entities, and come up with a framework that will then sort of support or complement the PFMA, and ensuring that we then harness the growth of our SMMEs. And in doing this, our department started a program last year, we call it DigiTech, where we said, you know, there's a whole lot of SMMEs that come up with innovations. We firstly have to find out where they are, so we then set up a platform, we call it a single digital marketplace, where the SMMEs register and they register their innovations, and then we then set over and above the platform. We then need to set up an ecosystem. So we engaged several private sector companies who already have programs that support SMMEs, because it doesn't help for you as government to always want to do everything by yourself, whereas there are others who are already having programs in place, systems in place. And we identified that there's a whole lot of them. For example, Microsoft, Cisco, they do have incubation programs, and we engage with them, we map them out, and we sort of link them with the SMMEs. So currently Microsoft is supporting quite a number of these SMMEs, but they are not only giving them skills, they are not only giving them business support interventions. What they're actually doing is they are also opening up their global value chain. So if there is a big project at Microsoft, they would then look within the database to say which SMMEs has the right skills, and then they give them a portion of that contract. And that is how we're actually going to actively grow our SMMEs. I often relate the story of Huawei, that the Chinese government made an intentional decision to support Huawei to a point where it has grown to be a global multinational. And in South Africa, as well as in the continent as government, we also need to look at frameworks on how we can support our SMMEs so that they can grow and become globally competitive. Thank you.
Thanks, Poncho. Sorry, Leslie.
Sure, thanks, Paul. I'm going to kind of blend the last question and this one, if that's okay. I think for me, there are a few points here. One is, and I agree with Jeanette's point, what we're seeing is that it typically takes about 6 to 10 years to get a return on investment for startups, going from concept development to scale up. And a lot of the players want to come in at the later stage where it's less risky. Is this on? Sure. Thank you. I think government has an opportunity to play a role at the developmental cycle of a venture. Very few players want to come in there. So the one is, it is around actually investing in the ventures, but also providing pilot sites. Because once they've proved their concept in an actual real live environment, other players are more willing to come on board later on. And for me, that's where infrastructure places like hubs and incubators come in as well, to provide that link to facilitate the quality of the ventures that go out. There was interest before lockdown by a few government players in province, Gauteng province, that it would be fantastic if we could pick it up. If spaces like Tshimologong can become clearing houses for government to procure from entrepreneurs, because we will partner with you to really make sure that those ventures are ready, go through a rigorous process with you before you select. That really creates a platform for the entrepreneurs to leapfrog. And then with regard to other policies like IP, I think, number one, we definitely need to demystify where and how to use IP. We're getting regular invitations. Our entrepreneurs are from various countries to move their IP abroad. And right now, we're not providing enough incentive for these entrepreneurs to build their ventures at home. So I think we desperately need to do something about that. Linked to IP as well, we need to incentivize researchers to commercialize. Right now, the incentivization is lenient towards publications. And yes, publications are important, but we definitely do not have enough that are moving on to commercialization. So thank you, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Poncho?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree, and I think that we've tried to do a little bit of, ensuring that the capacity we've developed and created can also support, requirements broader than just astronomy. And I think once, this program is sorted out of government being able to procure innovation, I think it will really, really help a lot of local technology developers. I think it's often a little easier for them to find other customers once they've at least had a first customer. And government really can bridge that gap quite significantly. So I think it would be great if, for instance, CETA also buys from, these local entrepreneurs, because there are people developing really fantastic technologies.
Thank you very much. If I could call on Ganesh, and I'm going to come to Marius at the end for a reason. Ganesh?
Sorry, Marius. So let me sort of put myself in the shoes of a woman entrepreneur from a township in South Africa, and see what are the regulatory and policy impediments that she will have to face. So firstly, can I register my business quickly online with at minimal cost or even zero cost, which is happening in other countries? Can I do it digitally without having to go to an office to physically do that? And then can I operate that business in terms of licensing and all those regulations required for business regulation? Is that all streamlined? Is that all digital? Can I do it without pain? And if I fail, can I exit my business easily? So entry, operation, and exit regulations need to be streamlined, need to be digital, and many countries are doing it around the world. And then you talked about IP, which is really important. To protect my business, I need to make sure that no one steals my ideas and runs away with it. And then I think what financing? I need risk finance. I need early stage finance. I'm going to rely on my family and friends to support my venture, but do I have access to government grant funding that will help me to reduce my risk and get me ready, investment ready to be able to access commercial financing? So that whole policy framework and around access to finance is key. And then talk about access to markets and procurement. So what's the public procurement policy? Is there a digital procurement platform where I can go onto and say, these are all the opportunities that I have to, that I can access? Can I access them easily? Can I be guaranteed that I have a fair competition, and so on? So that whole digital procurement platform and digital procurement agenda is important for access to market. And then finally, the policy environment for collaboration, for networking. I think we talked about that, the Innovation Bridge portal being one. Can government invest more in data systems? I talked about that. Can I have access to that data? Is that readily available? Can I access business networks easily? So I think there are many areas where regulatory and policy frameworks are important. There's need for innovation in policy and regulatory in that space. Like what's the word? Regulatory hackathons, for example, and so on.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. Now, the reason why Marius has had delayed gratification in terms of contributing at this point is, think about what we've heard. We've heard the national governmental perspective. We've heard the international governmental perspective, and we've heard from an innovation space. But, the sector that in many cases is most impacted by regulation and policies is industry. So that's the reason why I'm going to give Marius the second last word on this.
Thank you for that, Peter. I'm going to be brave and use this mic. I think from a regulatory and a framework and policy perspective, what the industry needs and what we would like governments to do is they need to be the enabler. That we need to allow the network operators to build the networks as quick and as efficient as they possibly can, that again allows for the connectivity. Because coming out of COVID, I think we all realized very soon as we went into lockdowns that connectivity allows for continuity. And without the connectivity, I can't do anything. I can have the best technology available, but if it's not there in the hands of the people that need it, it's not going to happen. So from our side, and this is very high on my team's agenda on the continent, is we would like to see pre-provisioning and rapid deployment mechanisms that needs to be adopted and applied for the cost-effective and the speedy penetration of the technologies that allow for that broadband connectivity. Okay? For example, we can look at mechanisms like aerial fiber, infrastructure sharing, installation of passive components when building new homes or businesses. As I speak, now many countries have already changed legislations right down to the building code that allow for these pre-provisioning mechanisms. On Africa, we've seen successes and things happening in countries like Kenya, Nigeria. We're in discussion and moving to a POC phase, as a matter of fact, in Kenya very soon. So again, to ensure that whenever the new buildings are there, the operators can come and connect. Rural areas, the connectivity it's very tough for the operators to do because it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of infrastructure to get to those rural areas. But again, if I utilize infrastructure sharing mechanisms and I utilize government assets, national or local government, we can do it much quicker and much more efficient. And then ultimately then again allows for that connectivity. We have even gone as far as to develop specific technology types. We've got a product called Rural Star, which we then take to these villages where there's no power and no infrastructure, and where we can connect those villages. We've touched on the skills as an example. We also need to look at, if we want to uplift those communities, we need to get rid of the feature phones and we need to get smartphones into their hands. But how do I get down the costs? Some countries has gone as far to exempt or zero rate ICT technologies, import duties, and taxes on the handsets to ensure that I can get that feature phone out of their hands, we skill them, and all of a sudden those villages becomes part of the digital economy. That's what needs to happen. But without government support, policy regulations, it's a very tough battle to fight. Thank you.
Thanks, Marius. I mean, just before I go on to the next issue that we're going to discuss, I'd like to share some of my own experience, because what's been said here resonates with me. I personally have great admiration for anybody who's brave enough to set up an innovation space, whether that's an incubator, an accelerator, a maker space. It's a thankless business. The likelihood is you will fail. The likelihood is that the people you're trying to support will fail, despite all your best intentions. The simple reality, unfortunately, is that university-hosted and government-hosted innovation spaces have a much more chance of survival and also potentially a greater chance of being impactful. Why is that? Well, in the case of a university-hosted innovation space, the great advantage is that you have subject matter experts on a great range of technology-related topics available to you through either the business school or through the engineering or the computer science school. So that obviously is a very good opportunity to identify a potential mentor, or maybe a professor who would be interested in being involved in a spin-off, for example, would work with a postdoc or would work with graduate students and help them operationalize for success. I actually believe that government-hosted innovation spaces, if they're done appropriately, can be even more impactful. And the reason for that is the point that Jeanette has been making about the challenge that CETA has, for example. Its mandate is to be the gatekeeper. Its mandate is to help government make the most rational, ethical, and impactful procurement processes so that they make the decisions based on the best possible information in the best interest of the national government. But the conflict of interest there is that that sometimes means that a multinational will get the business instead of an innovative company. So the advantage from my point of view of government-hosted innovation space is that one of the value adds that they can offer is that because they are government, they can provide opportunities to be a pilot user. You know, they could provide that opportunity to reach out to another line department and say, Department of Health, we have a very promising entrepreneur. This is the type of application. They need to work with somebody in the health space. Could you facilitate that they could access some local clinics, for example, in a deep rural area? Could they maybe talk to some of your policymakers to make sure what they're doing fits within the remit of what the Department of Health is trying to achieve? And that's just one example of how that could help Jeanette's objective, which is to identify how do I get my pilot customer so that I then have the credibility to go out in the marketplace. Then the other final point I'd like to make before I pass on is the issue of credibility by association. You know, if you have a mentor who has credibility in the marketplace, whether it's somebody from industry or whether it's somebody from academia or somebody from government, they can open doors. You know, part of the culture of IST-Africa is it's all first name basis. If you come up to me and you want to meet somebody, I'm going to introduce you on a first name basis. Because you're part of this community, they will treat you on that basis, not ask who are you and what do you want from me. They'll open an open dialogue with you to try to find common grounds. And I found myself that this credibility by association can be done in a number of ways, through mentors, but also government has a role to play. So when I came out of business school, and I come from Ireland, it was extremely difficult to get risk capital, and it still is challenging, but at the time my choices were go and work for a multinational or an international consultancy firm, go to work for a corporate finance outfit in London, which is where most of my peers ended up going, or go to the States because I got funding in the States. I wanted for family reasons to stay in Ireland as long as I could. So I was fortunate that I built a relationship with Enterprise Ireland, which is our national development agency in Ireland. They investigated what I was talking about. They looked at, you know, the underlying evidence that I provided. They were willing to take a chance on me. They gave me a grant package. They gave me a basic equity conversion package. And that gave me the credibility that then I could go and talk to banks. I got my first corporate credit card, which was how I started to access finance, was by getting a corporate credit card that was guaranteed by the bank based on the credibility of the government being willing to provide what was at the time quite a generous package for somebody who was starting from a concept. And then I proposed a project to the European Commission, which was funded. So that gave me a multi-million euro contract. So that was my first contract, a multi-million euro contract with the European Commission. So it just shows you that government can play a key role. And what I'd like all of you to think about is, who could you be a mentor to? Who could you facilitate in good faith an introduction to that might help somebody make the connections that's needed to have that opportunity to be an entrepreneur and to have access to capital? Okay, so that's something for you to think about. And again, I would encourage you to talk amongst yourselves, but also talk to the panelists over the next couple of days to explore some of these opportunities. So the second last issue that we want to discuss today with you is, what are some of the more innovative and impactful ways in which technology is being applied in different sectors across Africa to strengthen sustainable socioeconomic development. So I will pass this very unpoisoned chalice to Benene.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll probably just build on a point that Bonso made earlier, that much as we've got a lot of challenges in the continent, the opportunities are also massive. And the one, I mean, there's a whole lot of examples that we can really look at that are making a whole lot of impact. I mean, one big thing here in the African continent is the issue of mobile money. You know, the issue of having to get monies for a whole lot of us who are from rural areas, we need to be able to send money to our parents and so on and so forth. And I sit here and I'm sending the money through my mother using a mobile phone. And this really just is one of the many fruits of technology in these modern days. Then we are also seeing a lot of growth in the area of mobile agriculture, where, for example, people are beginning to, especially the smallholder farmers, use technology to monitor what is happening in their respective farms, exchange information, being able to really even, one of the areas where we are intervening is introducing a new program that we're piloting through the CSIR of what we call precision farming. And these are new areas that, much as a whole lot of that is being done now by bigger and more commercial farmers, these are platforms that were not necessarily available or accessible to small players. You know, so you'll be able to pick up a rural farmer and use these kind of technologies to empower them. So for me, those are really some of the areas that I'm looking at. And one of the things which really stems out from our many years of partnership with the World Bank is when many years we launched a program called the Mobile Applications Lab, MLab, today, which has actually supported a number of young people who were developing mobile applications to do all sorts of things. Some of them are now entrepreneurs in their own right. And this is a program that now we are beginning to massify, taking into various rural spaces and to create what you were talking about. Innovative and creative spaces where young people can walk in, either just with a phone or those who are lucky with a laptop, and they can get connectivity and they can begin to play on their gadgets and come out with a product that has got commercial value. So that's really some of the work that we're doing. And the good thing about this is you basically are putting the power of entrepreneurship in these young people who are actually very creative. I mean, last year, in South Africa, June is what we call the Youth Month. Last year, we had partnered with the Department of Tourism, and we had supported, I think it was about 15 young people to develop their own businesses using just simple ICT technologies. And out of that, when we officially handed over or graduate them last year, we had young people who have come up with business ideas, not ideas, actually businesses that were running, looking at tourism in rural areas, tourism in the townships. Some of them were bordering the areas such as our national parks, and they were already partnering with the parks in terms of using their platforms to really grow the participation even by locals in the tourism sector. So those opportunities are there, but we need to enable them in government, and we are trying to do that, and as I've indicated, through these various programs. So we are starting to see a whole lot of that. We have seen this also in health during COVID, where a whole lot of activities were being enabled through technologies, and I'm not talking big things like your Zoom and Microsoft Teams, but where communities are able to communicate and share information on various aspects surrounding their health using these technologies. So I do think that if we continue to create that environment of enabling and support, we are going to start to see Africa really benefiting, because one of the things is in terms of mobile connectivity, even though we might not always be having even 4G and 5G, but you're beginning to see that we are starting to loosen that space, and a whole lot is starting to happen. So hopefully through various improvements in regulations, even more accessibility by those in the rural areas will actually start to happen.
Thanks, Benene. Jeanette?
Thank you. On my side, I think the key one is around the issue of digital government, on how to use ICT to deliver services to the people. And I think in South Africa, we have been working on this digital government program for a number of years. It does have its challenges, but I think we are progressing well, and we are collaborating with the Department of Public Service and Administration and Presidency as well, where we mapped the system to say we have around, I think, 26 government departments, and in total, all the services that needs to be digitized, they are around 225. So what we did is we looked at those departments that already have developed e-services, and we then developed a national e-government portal that sort of publishes this e-services. Currently we are at 120 e-services, and the whole idea is now to automate all those services, look at the back end, integrate the infrastructure, integrate the systems, but also ensure that there are payment systems behind it, to allow for citizens, for example, someone in the rural areas who want to apply for an ID, that process could then be done on the mobile phone completely without them having to go and queue at Home Affairs. So that's one of the programs that we are doing. The other one is also looking at the future to say now the fourth industrial revolution is here, the artificial intelligence is here. Why don't we then invest as a country in building capabilities so that we are ready as a country, but also work with African countries as well. Hence, we as a department established the AI Institute of South Africa, where we are building pockets of excellence within different universities. We started with the University of Johannesburg, and we recently launched another one at Tshwane University of Technology, and there'll be more coming. I think the other one will be at Limpopo University. So it's about building the capability, building the skills so that we have the right skills in the country. And already there's interest from other African countries to say, we want to collaborate with you as you build capability. We work with you and do the same in our African countries as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeanette. And Ganesh?
Thanks. I mean, so many examples of how new new products and services are being deployed across Africa. There's amazing stories from Kenya, in agri-tech, for example, supporting small-scale farmers using data platforms for pricing, using robotics, drones, technology, and so on. Many examples like this across Africa. But I want to talk about some homegrown examples. Over the last couple of years, the World Bank has been partnering with the Department of Science and Innovation through the Innovation Bridge platform, portal, to reach out to underserved entrepreneurs in the 5 countries in Southern Africa. So we had through this platform, in partnership with a private incubator / accelerator, who made available a digital or a hybrid learner management system for incubation and acceleration. So we reached about 1,000 entrepreneurs, of whom about 700 over participated in the program. Just the first week of May, we showcased 35 of the top entrepreneurs for across the 5 countries. And some of the ideas that are coming out, these businesses are really exciting. In fintech, for example, those of you who know Stockwells in South Africa, I guess you know Stockwells. The whole Stockwell industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry in South Africa. And there are these startups now trying to digitize that sector and bring in digital technology to make it more efficient and more profitable. So that's one area. The other, there are startups working in townships to provide low-cost broadband access to township residents. And they're working directly with the ISPs. There's some regulatory challenges, Janet, we have to talk about. But these are disruptive businesses, homegrown South African or Southern African businesses with the potential to scale and transform the lives of the people, especially the poorer people in these countries. So in agri-tech, in fintech, education tech, health tech, clean tech, many of these businesses are out there. Is how do we support them to scale and support them to grow and become transformative businesses.
Thanks very much, Ganesh. Leslie.
Thank you, Paul. One of the things that excited me about the evolution of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, is that I'm starting to see a collapse of the wall between social innovation and digital innovation. Before it was the social entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs. But now it's everyone's business to get involved in the SDGs. So there's no longer the us and them, we're seeing increased innovation. So that really does well for sustainable, or for, in this question, to strengthen sustainable socioeconomic development. Some of the examples, local examples I'll share is, we have an entrepreneur, Neo Thiri, the founder of Pelebox, whose business started well before lockdown. It's called Pelebox, so it's really in the medtech space. And basically, when he had tuberculosis, he was, as an engineer, he was tired of queuing from 4 a.m. in the morning for chronic medication in clinics. And his solution was to come up with a smart locker system where you get a one-time one-time PIN by SMS. You walk in and out of the clinic within a minute or two. And he scaled to to more than 100 sites. He's won a lot of international awards in 2020, 2019. Time magazine named it as one of the top 100 inventions in the world, right out of Johannesburg. We've got Sisanda Tech that's using really interesting, creative ways of applying augmented reality in townships to teach kids biology. So it's a new lens in education where you can look at what's happening behind the ribcage or behind the construction of an eye. And suddenly this becomes accessible to kids that usually aren't part of these opportunities. And then I look at the gift of the pandemic. Sometimes I need to frame it like that. Again, like I said earlier on, we saw that we needed to produce our own solutions. Our makerspace converted Tshimologong precinct to a production site for PPE. And we've got 5 buildings downtown Joburg, so there's a lot of space. We could scale up really fast. UNDP saw what we're up to. They came to us with a few problem statements. We ran makeathons to look at how do we contextualize their problems or the solutions that they had to a South African context. They went out to market, validated it for the solutions, and the entrepreneurs converted those to businesses. The mining sector saw what we were up to. Sibanye Mines then donated a massive laser cut, and we started producing for the mining sector. So suddenly we had entrepreneurs who would have lost all their income sitting at home during lockdown. They were able to come to work, produce, and innovate. The final 2 examples I'll give is, the one is, I work with Insimolokong. First, we look at the intersection of hardware, software, and content. And from a content perspective, we do animation, gaming, VR, AR, XR. I won't get into detail of that tech. But we've disrupted how you look at education in the animation industry. It used to be known as an elitist space where you pay really expensive fees to go to schools to learn the skill. Our Animation Academy is highly competitive. Coming out of lockdown, I mean, this year we had over 400 applicants. We only take 10 to 12 interns per year. They're highly skilled. They're in demand now for production work, both as freelancers and they're also growing studios. Netflix has invested in a number of our alumni to go do their masters in Paris over the last 2 years. Our founding art director is creating an original Disney film that should be out in Disney Plus in the next few months. But the gift of the pandemic is that these guys sat at home and they focused on their work. We refined their skills. There was continuity and growth of the industry in South Africa as a result of the pandemic. The last example I'll give around technology is, again, just before lockdown, an entrepreneur out of Lagos convened a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and hub makers in Kigali. And we basically made the commitment to look at where and how we collaborate to make sure that the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement works. And this is, those of us, like I say, hub founders, where we're intentionally collaborating and we're saying, regardless of what the politicians do, we're going to do this. And we're collaborating and we're supporting our entrepreneurs across countries. We need to make sure that we can trade well. And I have a lot to say about South Africa's role around visas, but this is an opportunity for us to address some of our brain drain and access skills sometimes that we don't have enough of at home. We speak a lot about the brain drain, but we don't invite the brain gain, people who want to collaborate in South Africa. A lot of brain wastage of talented people in South Africa who can't access visas to work in spaces like ours. So that goes back to the policy framework, but also where technology can support.
Thank you very much. I like the concept of the intersection of hardware, software, and content. I think that's a very powerful way of looking at it. But I'd also remind people that content is a very low barrier to entry model. So if you want to do something innovative, but you can't afford the hardware, or you don't necessarily have the personal skills to do the software yet until you build a team, maybe starting with content could be a low barrier to entry way of starting this. Marius.
Thank you, Paul. Looking at the future, obviously as we do, and developing the technologies we do, if we look at 5G and beyond, each and every vertical of industry, of business, of government can and will be impacted by the technology. A lot of the businesses out there do not actually realize it yet. And I speak extensively on use cases across the world on how the technology is applied and utilized to the benefit in ensuring that the productivity aspects, I look at the safety mechanisms, etc., etc. Last year already in South Africa, we partnered with 2 of the network operators and we launched 2 5G smart mines. And I was privileged enough to be a keynote speaker at one of these events. And speaking to the people on the ground and seeing at the real world impact that the technology makes in that environment was astonishing for me. Because I speak about it a lot, but I don't see it a lot. And in terms of the safety aspects, all of those mechanisms now become a reality. The productivity capabilities, all of the problem solving, the data that can be hosted and analyzed on a need-to-be basis. We've seen facial recognition applied to pig farms in Mexico. We've seen facial recognition applied to the salmon industry in Norway. Right? So again, I think that it's such an exciting time for Africa at this point, but because once we make the technology available, we're going to be astounded as to what the future, the entrepreneurs, the students come from. And they show us what can actually be done. And that's what's exciting to me. Yes, we've got the use cases and we can apply it, we can guide, we can equip, but I'm waiting to see what Africa is going to do with this moving forward once the technology is available. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, that reinforces the importance of sharing and collaborating and not reinventing the wheel and building on what already exists. The last issue we have time to discuss today, because God forbid we get between you and your lunch, is how can innovation, science and technology be leveraged to further strengthen entrepreneurial capacity in South Africa as well as in a broader African context. And I'm going to start with my friend Benene.
Yeah, I think okay, it's very, very faint. I think the one issue that we need to look at is how we can actually improve connectivity throughout the country and throughout the continent. Because that's really where a platform is created for a whole lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, over the past couple of years, we have already started to see people and products that we never thought could be sold being sold on various technological platforms. You know, some will go into whether it's your social platforms, your Facebooks and whatever, and they are currently, as we speak, successful entrepreneurs. All they needed was just to have a username and whatever it is, and they are registered, and they do it. That can't happen if there's no connectivity. And that's really one thing that we need to really work on in the continent to make sure that everyone and everyone is connected. And the second thing, of course, is how do we provide that small seed? Because sometimes it's just a small seed that a person needs to go. We, in most cases, have instruments that support somebody who wants 5 million rands, but you don't have a seed that can support somebody who wants 50,000 rands. And this is really strange because it begins to show what is it that we're focusing on. And that's why when we work, you know, some of the projects that we're working on, for example, with the World Bank, is to say, whatever small amount you may require that can take you out to really do something, no matter how small, how do we then support you with it? So you don't come in and say, okay, I'm below the threshold, but everybody can have their own threshold to really enter into this space. And the last thing I want to highlight is just to make sure that the ecosystem is actually strengthened. Nothing lives outside the ecosystem. You and I are sitting here because there is an ecosystem that is supporting us. So businesses and entrepreneurs need their own ecosystem. You need to have a sense of who's the supplier. Where are the academic institutions where if a technology fails, we can look at them for further research and development for improvement. The market access, that's very important. And one way of building this access to market is to use technologies, for example, in things such as standards and regulation. Because people may have a product and they are denied market access simply because they can't get a paper of certification or to indicate that they meet the requirement. So I think these are some of the things that they can now be done through technology, and we need to just get it done.
Thanks, Benene. Jeanette?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I agree that for us to support the strengthening of entrepreneurial capacity, especially in the digital space, the first key thing is connectivity. And I've taken the points that have been said around connectivity and the need for, you know, rapid deployment, etc. And our department has actually got the rapid deployment policy approved, so it will make easier for the rollout of connectivity. But the other issue is that as government, over the years, we've been trying to roll out connectivity on our own, and we realize that it's really not that easy. So we will be working with the private sector. And with the SMMEs, I think the other area is around, you know, I think most of the SMMEs focus on the software development space, and that's where a lot of data is created. And most of them then So with the emergence of cloud computing, I think that's also one area of technology that's emerging, that's giving an opportunity, but then it's expensive. So from our side, with our DigiTech program, when we engage with multinationals, we get them to help these SMEs to store their data for free. For example, with the Microsoft program, they get to then store their data on the Microsoft cloud computing infrastructure, absolutely for free. So I think that's one of the areas. But also, you know, within our universities of technologies, etc., build you know, labs and infrastructure to allow SMEs to come as they please, come and test their solutions. For example, at CETA, they set up an innovation center in collaboration with Huawei, with Microsoft and Cisco, and SMEs are able to come in and test their solutions absolutely for free. So those are some of the things that I think we can do as government, but also as a collective to help harness entrepreneurial activity.
Thanks.
Yeah, fully agree with that. So I think firstly is skills and education. I'm talking from basic education, STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills, especially for women. We can't leave behind half the population of the country when there's participation of women in STEM right from elementary school. You know, I think that is something that we need to focus on. I think with specific programs and specific targets. So STEM education for women, that'll be one where I think we need to leverage technologies to be able to access young girls in schools. We have a partnership. We have the program called Partnership for Skills in Applied Sciences, Engineering and Technology. This is a mouthful. It's called PASA. This is an Africa-led initiative that the World Bank is supporting. This is to build capacity in universities and research institutions across Africa. It's been led by a few countries. It's about 10 years old now, PASA. It was led by Ethiopia, Senegal, and a couple of other countries. South Africa could play a huge role in PASA. I think that's an immediate opportunity. But I want to talk about bringing the ISD, Innovation, Science and Technology ecosystem to the communities. Because I've seen in South Africa, for example, those of you who know R Labs, reconstructed livelihoods. So R Labs runs programs in townships for township youth, high-risk township youth, and they work with youth. This youth who are from the community, they're embedded in the community, they enjoy the support of the community. It's a homegrown initiative. And they're super successful. If you look at their numbers, they're training all these young people. Some of them have developed their own startups, are doing really well. Others have learned digital skills and are getting jobs. And now that model is being rolled out in 5 townships across South Africa. It's called the D-Labs initiative. I mean, to me, those kind of sort of, I guess yours is similar too. It's embedded within the community. We need to bring the best of the ecosystem of the IST to these communities and work with them and build it from bottom up. I mean, I think I've seen that work and it's super exciting.
Thanks. Council?
I mean, I think that you know, how you strengthen entrepreneurial capacities, that, you know, you allow these talented people, firstly, to have access to information, because I think that's one of the things that's already been mentioned. But you also need to make sure that they have, you know, government now, we have a lot of data, that easier way of capturing this data. So use the data to understand where the gaps are. Let it inform new policies, where investments should go, because unless we do that, you know, all these things remain sporadic for the longest time. but I think also just the ability to have the patience. You know, I do find that we start projects in South Africa and then, you know, people don't see results in 2-3 years and they think it's not working. I think you made the example, and we say this all the time, people see a product in the market and people talk about, oh, so could we, no, it didn't start 2 years ago. It actually, the idea, the development started much longer than that. I think we've had the privilege of what I call a proper testing lab, because we had to build a telescope that works. We were not just doing, you know, development with the hope that we'll build something in future. We had to build something that works. It's created a vibrant lab that has led to real solutions that we've already tested. So we know that our compute infrastructure works. We know that our storage solutions work. And now actually the people who build those solutions for us have now gone on, they are developing cost-effective cloud compute solutions, so we must talk. They are developing, now we know that we have to refresh our archives, so they are already developing tape storage, you know, that is, again, cheaper, open source, of the shelf components. And you know, the more we can just allow then those solutions to be implemented elsewhere, it allows for people to build confidence in the fact that you know, entrepreneurship can be developed in a place like South Africa, you know, or Africa as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Leslie?
Thank you. I first want to invite Ganesh to consider STEAM. Don't forget the arts and creativity that also comes into play, and these are the touch points of collaboration between us and our labs, the conversation that Marlon and I are also pushing out. So it's a little provocation. I want to focus my closing comments on entrepreneurial capacity in rural and peri-urban or township economies. And because it is important, and I think, you know, for all the reasons also Marius mentioned earlier and Paul and a few other speakers. But I also want to challenge those of us who are running skills development spaces and incubators. I think quite often we tempted to take along our curriculum we developed in the city and take it to a rural context, where it's not applicable, it's not contextually relevant. And sometimes it's because we saying yes to the money from the funders who are saying, go run a course on blockchain or machine learning, or which is not necessarily relevant. Or let me not say it's not relevant. It's not the right starting point. When I look at, you know, theories like bricolage, it makes you consider, or it puts emphasis on looking at what resources already exist in your environment. What resource, what material can you reuse or upcycle and use in a new innovative way? When we have the starting point with communities, where we look at what are the local problems that you're having, what are the resources we have at our disposal, and invest in that, then technology starts becoming exciting and alive. And I'm especially saying this because in the early 2000s, when computers were rolled out at schools, we started seeing schools locking up computers and computer labs because they didn't want to break it. So it becomes dusty and also outdated software. We're seeing the same happen with maker spaces now, because this is the latest trendy thing that you must have. When you do it properly, and these spaces are important, it becomes alive and it becomes relevant. I think of one of our entrepreneurs, Paul, we call him Mr. Robot. You can actually Google him, he's been featured on CNN. He comes from Limpopo. He used to create robots from electronic waste and trash. He's now based in our makerspace and does, you know, his work before was sophisticated, but now he's got different kind of tooling and he's advanced that. So when Paul comes with us back into Limpopo, he's training, and it again becomes contextually relevant in terms of onboarding the local community. I also want to touch on the point around infrastructure. And you're absolutely right, Paul. Government's got to play a role in terms of where and how we do hubs. But we cannot have empty dinosaurs. It saddens me that a lot of hubs and incubators closed during lockdown, makerspaces shut down. The last 2 months, I won't name them, but you can Google this, 2 corporate-funded tech hubs closed, one in Cape Town, one in Joburg, 2 vibrant cities. It's not their core business, and they're not getting the return on investment fast enough. But entrepreneurs need infrastructure. One easy low-hanging fruit is paying the co-working space of entrepreneurs so they can enter spaces, not worry about paying rent for the first 2 or 3 years, use the infrastructure, get into a supportive community. That also supports the business model of hubs and incubators that really have to wait a long time to get a return on effort.
Thank you very much. And Marius.
Thank you, Paul. I was fortunate enough a number of years ago to be invited to Uganda to participate as a keynote speaker at the Ministerial Entrepreneurial Workshop Day. And while I was waiting for my opportunity to speak, there were 2 young gentlemen there waiting with me, and, you know, how are you, what are you doing, why are you here, type of thing started. And they said to me they were actually very tired because they flew in from New York the night before. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. They said, no, what happened was they come from the village. Huawei, with partnerships, connected the village. They are engineering students at the university. And while they're studying, they thought to themselves, what can we do that will enable and make something better for our people in the village? In Africa, as we all know, cows are very important. So they developed an IoT device that you can connect to a cow that measures the cow's temperature. And me, not knowing that much about cows, went like, but why? And they looked at me and they said, well, when you go sick, the first thing your mom did was, are you okay? So it measures the temperature of the cows. They've got the app, but then they took it a step further. You can take that data and you can send it to a vet whom they partnered with. So now they can send the data to the vet, and the vet can have a look at it and say, it's cold, you know, it's got a cold, or no, I'm on my way. They won an international app award. How was this all made possible? Because of the technology and the connectivity. That's how you start entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thanks, Marius. I'm sure you'll all agree with me that the panel has weaved a very rich tapestry for you today. So you might want to show your appreciation to Benene, Jeanette, Ponso, Ganesh, Leslie, and Marius. I have a little bit of housekeeping before I release you to feed yourselves, at least feed your stomachs. I hope this fed the mind. The scientific program starts at 2 o'clock, okay? I would strongly request that all presenters are in their respective session rooms no later than 15 minutes beforehand. Your presentation, yes, is on the laptop, but we just want to make sure everything's working correctly. You meet your moderator, you meet your colleagues so that you can have the kind of rich conversation and discussion that we've had here today. So the e-health track takes place in Amethyst. Societal Implications of Technology track is in the Emerald Room. Next generation technologies, including blockchain, will be the focus of discussion in the Crystal and Garnet Room. And then cybersecurity track takes place in the Onyx Room. You will be fed, at least your stomachs will be fed, if you go outside and turn left into the exhibition area. I'd remind you that the conference dinner is taking place at 6 o'clock tonight on the deck, and I hope that as many of you as possible will take that opportunity to network with new and with existing friends. And finally, I'd like to ask you to take advantage of being together for the first time in 3 years. You know, take advantage of the opportunity of the next 3 days to renew friendships, establish new relationships, and above all, listen to one another, to identify opportunities to collaborate to address societal challenges, leveraging appropriate technological innovation. Gur Mila Mahagath, and I look forward to seeing you over the next 3 days. Thank you. Thanks, guys. You were fabulous. If I could do this every day of the week, I'm sure we would talk about different things every day of the week.
But to STI. I'm working with someone who's doing that. That's true. Yeah, on their way. I just wanted to verify something. But feel free to use the laptop if you want to. No, I'll wait. No problem. I'll be thinking about what after the meeting. So I'm already using this thing like a speaker. The laptop. Out. I'm speaking on the laptop. Oh, you make a right direction. Yeah. Hey, James, let's do and go eat, but of it. I said no, I did help us in otherwise, no food. No food. No food, no food. So I'm also doing the dinner. But you never know with these people. You know, that event, National Prosecuting Authority, actually I was doing it with tabs, and I was using this STI converter. But for some reason, tabs was struggling to understand what was happening. I didn't have a mix, I'm not kidding. So tabs was struggling to understand it, I don't know what it's like. Because whatever is coming from the moon is going to the screen. Every time you take off the moon, you look at it, you need to know what it's like. You are the what it's like. There is no what it's like. use this car. So this is going to you. This is going to us.
Oh, converted. Oh, very converted. Oh, okay. Oh, that's only 4x3. Alright.
This is the laptop. In the setting, display setting.
I think that picture is an old one. Picture you go.
Is it the picture or is it the laptop?
No, it's a picture. I took it from a presentation.
Is it?
For you, ne? Or give me.
Design.
It's the second time hearing those that word, Emmanuel. What is BTS? Oh, hey, yeah, ne?
Never know.
Yeah, no, you.
You have to make sure.
Just in case, eh?
Hey, Ted. I have Kappa.
Other pants.
So he was looking for you. I think he'll come to you. He was looking for you.
For me?
Yeah. I think he'll come through.
I think I like them so.
Yeah, it's fine, it's sharp. Check. Stop on music.
Ik heb ook al een. How stop music? I hope it's a desk. Get how stop music? I hope it's a desk.
Shake your camera, let me turn. That's moving. Move your camera. This one.
Yeah, I can fix that one, but now you're holding it. So did you know that okay, ne?
Hey, yeah, let's put your key on the wall, eh? I want to go. Yeah. I was using the one in the white.
Can you go check Emmanuel? Emmanuel?
Yeah, okay, plug it in the yeah, it's like a
What's that?
something there, something on the
Something like what? Do you? Are you getting this mic? Why? Are you plugged on my desk, Baba? I'll plug on anything. anything. Are those yours?
Business kittimisa kanhlaka in audio.
Lama gang. I'm already sending.
Ngifuna share ukuthi uTibo seni audio ngingamplaka.
We even thought the camera was not working.
Because now low uta switch camera.
Where's the other one?
There's a solution. Get a quick solution.
Are you getting the audio now? Can you tie that up here? Where are those crowd pieces?
Yeah. Crowd pieces. Where are you? Those things we used to cover. Cover the technical team.
Yeah, let's make it tight now. Gaffer, where's the gaffer tag?
It's here.
Alright.
Yeah, not the duty one. You say these guys, the cables now, they don't care. You don't come to my face.
I mean, this goes.
Hey, this room. Hey, Nyawa. Where's Nyawa, Tips? Is this cable fine now? Because I need to go.
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you getting Nyawa, Mr.
But
Benson?
you can't be working tripod jobs. These guys, they also say SABC must do their things.
Sure. And Mr. Beto, are you getting Nyawa then?
Yeah?
Are you getting this camera?
Yeah, that camera.
So I can come. Is this enough snake for what you're trying to achieve? If he doesn't have snake, Nyawa. That means he's stuck there. So we can go. Very green light. These guys are here. This is the
1, 2, 1, 2. Is it still high? Ne? Very high. 1, 2, 2, 2. 1. Yeah? Okay. Check it up, ne? Please check. Check again. Tell me how it sounds.
Okay, take it down
A bit. Okay. Alright. Alright. How is it so far?
Take it down some more.
Yeah?
And I think, can you mute that podium mic? Because I think that's the one that's loud.
Okay. Alright. Okay. How is it now? Alright. But in the room, it sounds soft. Aux out.
Increase my aux and then in the room stays 1, 2, 1, 2. So unmute it.
Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So on my aux, you send me a bit of either you will reduce it, but here the
Alright. Oh, okay. 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 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. Yeah. 1, 2. Yeah.
Now, just speak the normal way you speak, not bring it here.
1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Injan. 1, 2. Yeah.
I'll be happy. Just small.
Oh.
I think you know it's fine. Let's go.
Let's go, man.
Okay. Think you very good 12 foot long. What I'm sending you. Okay.
Ngama aux am onke la. Nangu aux one.
Oxford.
Aux one.
Yes. Okay.
These guys were saying, BC was seen and we
Loaded in 3A.
Bayasave
L1.
mngani wami.
This
Yeah,
one.
angiyabazi. Bazokutshela
Yo,
bazokutshela ukuthi iSABC ayina mali. Owazi ke?
Nama ngitshela kanjalo. We are public owned enterprise. We don't
Yeah,
have
we don't have money.
You don't have money.
Yeah, that's what SABC will say.
So you're in
3A.
3A.
Okay, so I must drag it. I must
Yeah, Apparently, you need to. Do they have your presentation?
No. I've got it on memory stick.
Okay, yeah. You can put it on session A. Is this the?
I'll drag this. Okay.
Okay. Did you put your name there?
No, I don't see it there actually. I think it was
It's this
outside
one. This one.
It's under session A, I think.
It's this one.
Oh yes, that is it. Yeah. Oh, it has got my name actually.
Okay. That's the one. Okay.
Extract.
Okay.
Eject my memory stick.
Eject.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right.
How's it, Chief?
I'm putting it.
Just need to check if my presentation is on there. Okay, that's the first one.
You are the first one?
Yes, on the first presentation.
Okay. Can we go through it? Do you have audio on your presentation? Or it's just slides?
No. It's just slides.
Okay. All right. I'm happy. Let me go and get a clicker. 1, 2, 2, 2. Yeah, 1, 2. 1, 2. Sorry?
Do I have to lean in?
No, you need to stand up straight.
All right.
Yeah, it will pick you up.
Sure. The tip was where I sitting. Me? Yeah. With you, guys. You must get a table. Table for what? Table for what? Chair. No, I'm not getting anything. That's it. I just need a chair. I thought maybe you needed a table. No. Current business. We check it. Okay. So I was going to just change the audio at the end. Why make it? Yeah. Why not is going to the project? Yeah. Project. Are we connected to Teams? Aren't you getting you're getting, what do you call it, the slides? It's too loud. That put your mic. I think let's test it. She says, okay, then we start from scratch. Reduce all of them, let's start from scratch. Yeah, but then who's going to be monitoring them? Okay, I can monitor them. Can you still hear me if I can you mute the first one, let's see? 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Next.
Tell if, is it loud?
Well, don't you want to first figure out which one is the one?
Yeah, but this is audio in and have it on.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Now you know. 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Health leadership in sub-Saharan Africa. A rapid review. Leadership is a very critical role. When you look at it, 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing rice 1, 2. Yep. 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. Yep. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. Yeah, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yep. 1, 2. 2. 1, 2. 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. Yebo. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, testing 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Yep. 1, 2. Yep. No, it is working. 1 2 1 2. Yeah, true. 1 2 testing. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Up, up. 1 2 1 2. Testing rice. 1 2. Check mic. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Kiphelele ke manje. Mic check. 1 2 1 2 testing. 1 2 1 2. Yeah. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Testing rice.
Something's not right. What are you using? 59 heads or 60 heads?
I usually use 50. What I use? Last testing.
Because it's flashing now.
Mic check. Testing rice. 1 2 1 2. Let's try that one.
It says Black Magic. Let's put it on 59 heads. Close. Hello, man. 3D. 3D. Where's 3D? No, this is 3A.
Are you still getting the slide?
It should be upstairs. No, upstairs. Another floor. One floor up again. Onyx. Yes. Check Onyx, ma'am. You're welcome. Yeah, sure. Sorry?
Is it okay to connect my own laptop when I'm presenting?
No, because we are running everything from this one. Okay. Yeah. What do you need from your presentation?
Maybe.
From your laptop?
Yes, I modified it a little bit than the one which is submitted.
What, your presentation?
Yes.
But you can copy it on a stick and put it here.
Oh, I don't have the. Can I log into the doing that?
No problem.
Okay, no, this is not. I'm not logging now.
Okay.
When I'm.
But we need the presentation just to make sure that we are sorted, you are happy before we start. Can we try that?
Yes.
Yes. Sticky Chubik. Yeah. Can you please borrow? Yeah, he'll borrow your stick. Hola. Sure. Yeah. Check out the are you getting something? Romel everything. We have any? Yeah, and check it. Sure. One, two, two, two. Yeah, 1 2 1 1 2. Check 1 2 1 1 2. Yeah, 1 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 1 2 3 4. Oh, tell an audio, ne? All right. 1 1 2 2 2. I think check guy and I would oh yes, also check it up. 1 1 2 2 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 1 2 1 1 2 2 2. Yeah 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8